To be original is, in many cases, a sentence to solitude.
Have you ever felt like you think in a way that no one around you understands? Have you noticed things that everyone else ignores? Questioned truths that no one discusses? And wondered why only you see what you see? It's not an exaggeration. It's not being dramatic. It's real. And the more you grow in this way of thinking, the more you realize a hard truth. You simply don't fit in anywhere. Not because you're too weird, but because your way of seeing the world doesn't fit into the ready-made molds that everyone accepts without questioning. You notice details that no one mentions. You question rules that everyone follows without thinking. You feel that something is wrong, but no one else seems to notice. And gradually you wonder why only you see what you see. This feeling isn't new. It's been there since childhood, when you asked questions that left adults without answers, or when you noticed contradictions that everyone preferred to ignore. Over time, this intensifies. You grow up, but the world around you seems to get shallower. Conversations become empty. Relationships seem superficial. And there you are, trying to understand why no one else feels the weight of things the way you do. Thinking differently isn't a romantic gift. It's a silent burden. Because it's not just about having original ideas. It's about seeing layers that others don't see, feeling weights that others don't carry, and living at a different pace than the world. It's like you're on a frequency that no one else tunes into. And that hurts. It hurts because you didn't choose to be this way. You simply are. This mental labyrinth starts early. When you were still a child, you asked questions that made people uncomfortable. Why do people lie and pretend everything's okay? Why does everyone do things just because others do them? Why doesn't anyone question what's obvious? These questions didn't have satisfying answers. And over time, you learned to stay quiet. Not because you stopped thinking, but because you realized your doubts weren't welcome. The world prefers those who accept, not those who question. It prefers those who follow, not those who stop to think. And so you try to adjust. You try to laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You try to be interested in topics that bore you. You try to pretend everything's fine when inside there's a whirlwind. But it doesn't work, because the feeling of being out of place only grows. It's like wearing clothes that don't fit. You can even manage to wear them for a while, but soon they start to tighten, to suffocate, to hurt. And then comes the question that won't go away. Is the problem with me or with the world? The truth is, it's not with either. The problem is in trying to force a fit that will never exist. You weren't made to fit into ready-made molds. Your mind doesn't work like most people's. And that's not a defect. It's just a difference. But difference in this world is treated as an error, as something that needs to be corrected, adjusted, fixed. So you grow up hearing that you need to be lighter, simpler, more normal, as if normality were a desirable goal. School was the first place where this difference started to weigh heavy. While everyone seemed comfortable memorizing answers and repeating formulas, you wanted to understand why. You wanted to go beyond the surface. But the system doesn't reward those who think deeply. It rewards those who obey quickly. So you learned to stay quiet, to keep your questions to yourself, to pretend you were satisfied with shallow answers. But inside, the restlessness only grew. At work, the same thing. Everyone seems comfortable following senseless protocols, accepting empty hierarchies, pretending motivation for goals that make no real difference. You look around and see people living on autopilot, doing things because that's how it's always been done, without questioning, without thinking. And you try to do the same, but you can't. Each purposeless task suffocates you a little more. Each empty meeting empties you a little more. You feel like you're wasting your life on something that has no meaning. In relationships, the weight is even greater. Because there, you need truth. You need depth. You need someone who understands not just what you say, but what you feel. And that's rare. Most people don't want to dive deep. They want to stay on the surface, where it's safe, where it doesn't hurt. So you find yourself alone even when you're accompanied. Surrounded by people, but without anyone who really sees you. Being different isn't a choice. It's a condition. You didn't decide to think this way. You didn't decide to feel this way. It just happened. And pretending to be normal hurts more than being alone. Because when you pretend, you lose a piece of yourself each day. When you accept the loneliness, At least you remain whole. And there's a dignity in that. A silent strength in choosing truth instead of false comfort. But it's not always easy to recognize that strength. Most of the time, what you feel is tiredness. A deep, existential tiredness that doesn't go away with rest. Because it's not the body that's tired. It's the soul. Tired of not belonging. Tired of not being understood. Tired of carrying a weight that no one else seems to see. You can't ignore what you feel, or silence what you think. Everything reverberates in you intensely. A superficial conversation empties you. An injustice revolts you. A social lie suffocates you. And the world, so superficial, seems to have no place for those who feel so deeply. People complain that you think too much, that you feel too much, that you complicate things too much, as if feeling were a defect, as if thinking were an exaggeration. But what they call excess is just depth. What they call complication is just awareness. You didn't choose to have this sensitivity. It simply exists. And trying to suppress it is like trying to stop breathing. You can manage it for a few seconds, but soon the body reacts. The soul reacts too. It doesn't accept living on the surface. It needs depth to breathe. And then comes the isolation. Not physical isolation necessarily, but emotional isolation. The kind that happens even in the middle of a crowd. You're there, present in body, but absent in essence. Because no one touches what you really are. No one sees what you really feel. So you learn to build walls, to protect your depth, to only show the surface, because that's all people can see anyway. Over time, even words lose meaning. You try to explain what you feel, but words don't reach it. You try to share what you think, but you're met with strangeness. You try to open up, but you encounter empty looks. So you stop trying. You stop explaining yourself. You stop seeking understanding outside. And silence becomes the only safe place. It's hard to explain to others what happens inside you. Your ideas are received with strangeness, your pain with indifference, until one day you stop trying to explain yourself. Not because you gave up on people, but because you understood that not everything can be translated. There are things that can only be felt. There are weights that only those who carry them understand. And there's a loneliness that cannot be transferred. This silence isn't giving up. It's protection. It's a way of preserving what's valuable in a world that doesn't know how to value it. You learn that not everyone deserves access to your depth, that not every conversation deserves your energy, that not every space deserves your presence. And there's freedom in that. A bitter freedom, but real. Meanwhile, other people's routine seems comfortable. They wake up, work, talk about trivial things, laugh at empty jokes, go back home, sleep, and start over. And they seem satisfied with that. You watch and don't understand how they manage it, how they don't feel the weight of meaningless repetition, how they don't question the life they're living. And you wonder if the problem is with you for feeling so much, or with them for feeling so little. But for you, each step requires effort. Living among people who don't see what consumes you is like trying to sleep in a room that's too bright. You close your eyes, but the light is still there, preventing rest. You try to relax, but the tension remains, because you see what others don't see. You feel what others don't feel. And carrying this awareness alone is exhausting. The existential tiredness of living at odds with the collective obvious doesn't go away with vacation. It doesn't go away with a change of environment, because it doesn't come from outside. It comes from within, from the dissonance between who you are and the world where you live. And this dissonance has no easy solution. You can't change who you are, and the world won't change to welcome you. So you're stuck there, in between, trying to find a way to exist without losing yourself. And it's at this point that something important happens. Something that symbolic psychology explains well. Jung spoke of the emergence of the self as something that separates us from the masses. The birth of an original true thought usually comes accompanied by rejection because it breaks collective structures. When you start thinking for yourself, when your consciousness expands beyond what's accepted, you automatically distance yourself from the collective. It's not that you choose to distance yourself. It's that your inner growth creates a natural distance. It's like you're climbing a mountain while everyone else stays in the valley. The view changes, the perspective changes, and you can no longer pretend you see the same thing they saw before. This is lonely, but it's also necessary. Because the symbolic birth of the different happens precisely in this exile. When thinking becomes an exile, you stop being just another one. You become unique. But before accepting this uniqueness, you probably tried everything to fit in. You already tried to be simpler, less intense, more practical, shallower, just to be understood. You wore masks that you thought would make you belong. You pretended to have interests you didn't have. You silenced opinions that made people uncomfortable. You smiled when you wanted to cry. You agreed when you wanted to disagree. All of this just to not be rejected, just to not be left out. But that comes at a price. Each concession takes you away from who you really are. Each time you betray yourself to please others, you lose a piece of your essence. And there comes a moment when you look in the mirror and don't recognize yourself anymore. Because the person you became to be accepted isn't you. It's a diluted, weakened, false version. And living like that is worse than living alone. The masks you tried to wear just to be accepted suffocated you gradually. And when you finally take them off, you breathe relieved. Even if that means being alone. Because loneliness with truth is better than company with lies. And there's a strange peace in accepting that you won't fit in. A peace that comes from surrender. Not from giving up, but from accepting that your place isn't where everyone else is. There are environments where uniformity reigns, where everyone thinks the same, talks the same, acts the same. Corporate offices, closed social groups, rigid families, dogmatic communities. In these places, your presence is like a crack in the wall, uncomfortable, out of place, but necessary. Because you don't reflect the pattern. You question, you challenge, you make people uncomfortable. And the interesting thing is that these places don't expel you with words. They expel you with silences, with looks, with subtle exclusions, with conversations that stop when you arrive, with invitations that never come, with the clear feeling that you're not welcome, even though no one says it openly. And you feel it. You feel it in your body, in your soul, in the weight of the air when you walk into a room. You feel that you don't belong, and gradually, you stop trying. The emptiness of places where everyone fits in and you don't is real. But it's also revealing, because it shows that not every space is for you. And that's not bad, it's even liberating. When you understand that you don't need to fit in everywhere, you stop forcing yourself. You stop diminishing yourself. You stop betraying yourself. And you start seeking or creating spaces that really make sense for you. It's not always the world that excludes you. Sometimes it's you who, without realizing it, have already said no to everything that's false. Your exile may be an act of courage, an unconscious refusal to live in the collective lie, a choice by the soul for truth, even if that costs loneliness. And there's strength in that, a strength that you may not even recognize yet, but that's there, sustaining you. Refusal as strength is a powerful concept. When you refuse the false, you're affirming the true. When you refuse the surface, you're seeking depth. When you refuse the empty collective, you're honoring your uniqueness. And that, even if lonely, is an act of integrity. Because you're choosing to be whole instead of being accepted. You're choosing to be true instead of being comfortable. And yes, that has consequences. Living with your soul exposed, with lucidity on the surface, is living with raw flesh. You can't laugh at what isn't funny, or pretend everything's okay. Each falsehood hurts you. Each superficiality empties you. Each social lie suffocates you. You live without the protection that unconsciousness offers. You live exposed to the world as it really is, and that hurts. But this sensitivity, despite being painful, is also your rarest strength, because it's what allows you to see beyond. It's what connects you with deeper layers of existence. It's what makes you feel real beauty, true pain, life in its total intensity. People who live on the surface will never feel what you feel. They'll never see what you see. And as lonely as that may be, it's also a privilege. A bitter privilege, but a privilege. The bitter beauty of living with your soul exposed is precisely in this. You feel everything, the good and the bad, the beauty and the pain, the truth and the lie. And you can't anesthetize yourself like others do. But it's precisely this inability to anesthetize yourself that keeps you truly alive. Because living anesthetized isn't living. It's just existing. And you weren't made to just exist. You were made to live intensely, even if that hurts. And when there's no place outside, you start building a world within. Introspection becomes your refuge, not out of weakness, but out of necessity. Because it's in there that you find what the world doesn't offer: depth, truth, meaning. And there, in the images of your soul, symbols, dreams, and forces emerge that show you that loneliness isn't an end, but a portal. Finding shelter in the invisible is finding shelter in yourself. It's discovering that you carry an entire universe inside you. A universe that doesn't need anyone's approval to exist, that doesn't depend on an audience to be real. And the more you dive into this inner universe, the more you realize that the loneliness you feared so much is actually a companionship, the companionship of yourself. And when you learn to be your own company, the external world loses the power to define you. The symbolic power of creative introspection is in transforming emptiness into creation, in transforming loneliness into art, in transforming pain into wisdom. You start to write, draw, create, think, dream. And in these creations you find meaning, you find beauty, you find yourself in ways you would never find out there. Because out there, you were always limited by others' gaze. In here, you're free. And once in a while, even in the middle of exile, rare encounters happen. You cross glances, hear words, read something and feel, there's someone like you there. These encounters are discreet, but transformative. As if the invisible were calling you, as if life were saying, you're not as alone as you think. The secret encounters with other strangers like you don't need to be many. Sometimes all it takes is a look that understands, a phrase that resonates, a text that seems to have been written for you. And suddenly you feel you're not the only one. That there are other souls out there, also exiled, also seeking, also feeling too deeply to fit in shallow places. And that comforts you. Not because you stop being different, but because you realize you're not alone in the difference. These encounters don't follow common logic. They don't happen at parties, social events, or scheduled meetings. They happen in the unexpected, in a book comment, in a song lyric, in a late-night conversation, in a look that lasts a second too long. And when they happen, you know without needing words. Because there's a recognition that goes beyond the rational. It's soul recognizing soul. And it's in these moments that you understand something important, that what sets you apart also reveals you. Symbolic psychology teaches precisely this. Difference as an expression of the soul, not as a manufacturing error. What you try to hide is often the most luminous part of your truth. What shames you may be precisely what makes you unique. And when you stop fighting against your nature and start honoring it, everything changes. You realize you don't need to fix anything in you. That you're not broken. That you're not defective. That your way of being is just different, not wrong. And this realization liberates. It liberates because you stop spending energy trying to fit in. You stop betraying yourself. You stop diminishing yourself. And you start expanding into what you really are. And that's where the most important concept of all comes in. Jung called individuation the process of becoming who you really are, even if that means not fitting in any external place. When you fit into yourself, the need to belong dissolves, because you understand that the only place where you really need to fit is within yourself. Individuation isn't an easy path. It requires courage. It requires you to face your shadows, your fears, your most difficult parts. It requires you to stop being who others expect you to be and assume who you really are. And that's scary, because it means giving up external approval. It means accepting loneliness as part of the path. It means living without the crutches of the collective. But it's also the truest path. Because when you become who you really are, you stop living divided. You stop carrying the weight of a life that isn't yours. You stop pretending, forcing, adjusting. And you start living whole. And living whole, even if alone, is better than living accompanied but broken. Individuation, as a path to building a place within yourself, is the process of becoming your own home. Of not needing the world to validate you to know you have value. Of not needing people to understand you to know you make sense. of not needing to fit in anywhere because you already fit into you. And when you reach this point, exile stops being a curse. It becomes a conscious choice. And here's the paradox. Being whole costs dearly, but not being costs everything. When you choose to be true, you may lose friends, opportunities, comforts. You may be more alone. You may face more rejection. But when you choose not to be who you are, you lose yourself. And losing yourself is losing everything. Because what good is having the whole world if you don't have you? Being true may leave you alone, but ceasing to be who you are empties you until the silence becomes unbearable. And between the two pains, the pain of being who you are is worth more. Because it's a pain with dignity. It's a pain with meaning. It's a pain that doesn't destroy you, but builds you. The pain of betraying yourself is a pain with no way out. A pain that corrodes you from the inside until there's nothing left. The price of freedom is high, but the prison of forced belonging is worse. When you live imprisoned by what others expect, you live in an invisible cage. A cage made of approvals, expectations, masks. And you may even look free on the outside, but inside, you're imprisoned. When you live free to be who you are, you may be alone, but you're whole. And whole, you have what no one can take away, yourself. And maybe, just maybe, not fitting in is exactly where you need to be. Because not fitting in is a sign of expansion. It's the symbolic space between the old and the new, between what everyone accepts and what's yet to come. You're in this liminal space, in this formless place. And it's uncomfortable, yes. But it's also where transformation happens. If you think differently, maybe you're exactly where you need to be. Maybe your function isn't to fit in, but to open paths. Maybe your pain isn't an error, but a calling. A calling for you to become who you really are, without asking permission, without apologizing, without diminishing yourself. And when you answer that calling, you realize you never needed a place in the world. Because you are the place. You are the entire world contained in a soul. This path of becoming whole, of accepting your difference, of honoring your depth, is what symbolic alchemy calls transformation. Transforming exile into choice. Transforming rejection into freedom. Transforming loneliness into an encounter with yourself. And this process doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, it's painful, but it's real. And when you look back, you realize that each pain was worth it, because it brought you here, to you. To understand more about alchemy, I invite you to check out the channel's exclusive material, which is in the first pinned comment. You're not alone, even though you're unique. There are others like you. Others who feel too deeply. Others who think beyond the obvious. Others who don't fit in anywhere. And even if you never meet physically, you're connected by the same search, by the same pain, by the same courage to be true in a world that rewards lies. And that matters. It matters because it shows that your difference isn't an accident. It's a purpose. If you made it this far, it's because something in this text resonated with you. Because you recognized your own journey in these words. And that's not a coincidence. It's a sign that you're on the right path. The path of those who don't settle for the surface. Of those who seek real meaning. Of those who are willing to pay the price of truth. And this path, however lonely it may be, is the only one worth it. Because it's the only one that takes you home. Inside yourself. Don't subscribe to this channel if you want ready-made answers or cheap comfort. But if you want to keep diving deep, if you want to transform your difference into strength, if you want to understand the symbols of your own soul, then stay with us. Leave your like on this video so that more people like you can find this content. And remember, you don't need to fit in anywhere. You just need to fit into you.